what we find in a variety of different studies, experiments, and field data, in organizations is that when people even just witness rudeness, much less experience it,
Mm-hmm.
their creativity drops. It hijacks their attention and their focus, and as a result, their memory actually tends to work 18%
Oh, wow.
slower. So it has real effects on people's brains.
Welcome to Limitless Minds, the podcast where curiosity meets greatness. Each week, co-hosts DJ Eitzen and Harry Wilson sit down with some of the most exceptional individuals across sports, business, and beyond. From world-class athletes and peak performance coaches to visionary CEOs, entrepreneurs, and influential authors, they dive deep into the stories and strategies that drive extraordinary success. If you're ready to discover what it takes to be truly limitless and push beyond your own limits, you're in the right place.
Welcome to the Limitless Minds podcast. Today, we're joined by Dr. Christine Porath, professor, researcher, speaker, and best-selling author of Mastering Civility, The Cost of Bad Behavior and Mastering Community. Christine has spent over 20 years studying how people treat each other at work and why it matters. Her research shows that civility isn't just about being nice. It impacts performance, well-being, and retention. In this episode, we'll talk about what civility really looks like, how leaders can create environments where people thrive, and why human flourishing gives companies an edge. It's a powerful and practical conversation. Enjoy the show. Well, welcome to the Limitless Minds podcast. We have our old friend, Dr. Christine Porath, on the show today. Welcome, Dr. Porath. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me. It's great to see you again.
It's so good to see you. It's funny when I saw your face. I immediately thought of two things. One, Cleveland, because both of our loves for Cleveland. Christine is from Cleveland, and so we got that bond there. But I also I thought about our late friend Trevor, and it, like I didn't expect that. There was actually a little bit of emotion that came through when I first saw you because he introduced us, so anyways, yeah, maybe we'll start there. Tell us a little bit about your relationship with Trevor, the late Trevor Moad, and yeah, take us back there.
Yeah, that's great. It's funny because I just reread his two books in the last week in preparation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it was awesome. I mean, I really enjoyed getting to know Trevor. My brother actually met him first, and he was talking about some of the research, and it was a small gathering venture capital group. And my brother went up to him afterwards and said, like, you were talking about my sister. And Trevor had no idea what the connection was. And anyway,
Right.
it was wonderful to meet Trevor. We had some commonalities because we both spent time at IMG Academy. I think we just
Yeah.
missed each other. And so we had some of the same friends and network and all of that. But most of all, we also cared about the same issues, and we're tackling it in somewhat different fields in the sense of, I worked at a business school. I had done a lot of the research in organizations, and Trevor had spent so much of his time at that point with, professional and collegiate athletic teams. I had a background in sports, so I love that pairing.
Mm.
And he had such powerful stories, and it was really fun to work with him because just of who Trevor was and what a wonderful person he was, but the work that he was doing. And also, I thought we complemented each other nicely, which was
No
a lot of
question.
fun.
No question. I used to love to watch that. You bring the science and the data. Trevor brings the stories, and those two were just like, what a great match. Yeah, but again, that was weird when I first saw you. I did not expect to feel that kind of emotion, and he loved you a lot. And
Oh,
he really did, and respected the heck out of you. So it's really cool to catch up again here on the podcast. You mentioned some of your early experiences. How did your early experiences, and I know we've talked about in the past some of the toxic sports management cultures that you were either a part of or had to witness. How did that spark your interest in studying workplace behavior?
Yeah, so I guess two things. One was I started sports was my passion. So from the
Mm-hmm.
get-go, played sports all through college, soccer and basketball. And so that was
That's
such a
cool.
part of like the fabric of who I was. I knew I wanted to do something with that, but it wasn't until my experience around a toxic work, sports
Mm,
management, and marketing environment that I actually kind of paired the two. So
yeah,
I ended up going back to get a PhD just to try to show as objectively as possible what are the costs of bad behavior and
yeah,
how does the negativity even affect people and pull them off their game such that it can spread and lead to just a whole host of really negative outcomes for organizations. Because my early work experience right out of college, I was shocked that like this was so costly and no one seemed to be paying attention to it. And so
right.
tried to figure out the science behind it to use as a motivator for let's do something about this and try to correct what we can and build more positive workplaces or teams where people can thrive.
No question. No question. So where did you go to high school and college?
So I went to Gilmore Academy. Well, I transferred in,
Okay.
went to start at Solon, went to Gilmore,
Okay. Yeah.
and played sports there, of course. And
That's a
then
beautiful campus.
it
Gilmore Academy
is,
is a great
yeah.
campus.
My
We were just
uncle.
over there.
Oh, you were?
Yeah, yeah, we were just over there. My daughter runs track, and yeah, so it's
Oh.
an awesome campus.
That's awesome. Yeah, my uncle had coached basketball there, and so he had, we kind of had some roots there, and I was fortunate enough to, transfer in there and had a really wonderful experience academically and athletically, and then went on to Holy Cross, where again hope to partner the athletics and the academics, and uh, kind of go from there.
That's cool. Where's Holy Cross? Is that in New York?
Up in Worcester, Massachusetts, outside of
Massachusetts.
Boston.
Okay. That's right. That's great. That's great. Yeah, and even when you go back to those teams, what were some of the things where you saw on toxic teams, if you're ever part of one, or teams that thrived? Are there any things that you look back on and you're like, "Oh, that was actually a lesson. That was a PhD and and I didn't even know I was going through it."
Yeah, I mean, I think on the positive side, so the college basketball team that I was a part of, they had a tradition. We were fortunate enough to go to March Madness and everything, so that
Oh,
was
wow.
awesome.
That's
Yeah,
cool. Really cool.
yeah. We were of course the underdog, kind
Yeah.
of getting in, but the coach was such a role model for, the things that we'll talk about in terms of just a really positive, respectful guy, but also encouraged us. Like we did a lot on campus and off campus as far as volunteering and things
Yeah.
like that. And
Mhm.
it just was a really tight knit team where, he would talk about us as family and we acted that way. And it was just, I can't describe, like in hindsight, he was such a wonderful leader to learn
So
from.
cool. Yeah.
And then the benefit of like you are tied to those people forever kind of thing. So that was awesome. And I had some negative experiences along the way where
Mhm.
it wasn't a toxic team by any means, but it just everything compared to that fell short.
Yeah.
Like that
That's
was
right.
a great model. And then since then, one of the people that I've learned about or learned from, I'm working on a book with Anson Dorrance, who is a
Okay.
women's, just retired as the former women's soccer coach at UNC. After 45 years, won 22 national championships, kind of started the US women's national team.
Yeah.
So I was able to spend 3 full seasons and then have been around since, with them before he retired and learned so much from that
Oh,
culture
yeah.
and individual, and, so that was awesome. So I'm
That's
happy
really
to.
cool. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's that's really cool. We Travis Thomas, who works with the men's team, and then Joanna Lohman, who's also one of our speakers and coaches, played on the women's national team. So
Oh,
yeah, so we have some roots there with Limitless Minds. We're now up to, Dr. Porath, you'd be proud of us, 22 coaches, and we're
wow.
working with a number of amazing companies. But again, a lot of that was rooted in the work that you and Trevor did early on with us. And, again, we appreciate that. So it's so
Oh,
awesome.
well, it was my pleasure. Yeah,
Yeah,
loved collaborating with you guys
that's
and
right.
all of that.
So cool. So cool. Yeah. And I thought about you recently. My daughter and she took her first college visits. One of them was to Georgetown. So yeah, Georgetown, George Washington, American University, and then also Howard. So yeah,
Oh,
we did that about 3 weeks ago. And I thought about you when I was on that campus. You're now at UNC though, right? Is that
I
correct?
am. Yeah.
Awesome.
So I moved from there, and it was wonderful because I remember Harry and you visited me at
That's right. We did.
Georgetown.
We did. We still got the shirt. My wife wears the sweatshirt I got her there. So it's
Oh,
great.
nice. Yeah, no, that was a great day. And so, yes, I did. I headed back to where I did my PhD, which is at UNC Chapel Hill. And,
Okay.
part of the reason was working with the athletic team, specifically women's soccer, but getting to know the community of coaches there and
Yeah.
trying to pair the idea of coaching and leadership with the athletic department. So, kind of working on that and potentially a center and things like that
Yeah.
stem from those collaborations, but really the work with Ansa Dorrance and women's soccer.
Very cool. Very cool. So going back into civility in the workplace, what does incivility look like in a day-to-day work life?
Yeah, so it's tricky because it's all in the eyes of the beholder, so it's
Okay.
very subjective.
Mm-hmm.
But really, what it is just when someone feels disrespected or belittled or treated insensitively in some way. It shows up when someone's not paying attention to you, like they may be staring at their phone or something like that, and someone feels like you aren't even valuing me or respecting me.
Right.
It could also be much more extreme in the sense of, belittling people in front of a group at the end of a meeting, insulting someone, telling offensive jokes, teasing people in ways that sting.
Mm,
So there are so many different behaviors. And I
right.
think the important part is that someone felt disrespected or treated rudely. And so that's what really matters because a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times I don't think it stems from bad people doing bad things as much as just, it's not bad intentions necessarily, but it's still really costly.
Yeah, and I started it, and obviously you are the guru of civility, right? I started with incivility because like Trevor always taught, and that you have the research that backs it. Negative is so much more powerful than positive, right? Tell us a little bit
Right.
about that.
Yeah, so he had some interesting data, 10 to 1 kind
Mhm.
of
Yeah,
results.
yeah,
A lot of the psychology research, including my own, what we find is like de energizing ties, or you're part of a team where, it pulls you down versus like an individual that might lift you up and energizing. What we have found across different contexts and industries is 4 to 7 times. So
okay,
bad is stronger than good, and that's
yep.
really consistent across the literature, unfortunately.
I know
So
it stinks. It stinks, but it's so
yeah,
true.
yeah.
It's so true. It's like how we're wired as humans, and maybe it's a protection mechanism, but the truth is it is much more powerful. What about civility? Like, what does that look like and mean in the workplace today?
Yeah, so it's really people feeling like valued, appreciated, heard, things like that. I
Hmm.
think the idea being someone feels like they were treated with dignity. It could be as simple as acknowledging someone. So,
Okay.
the idea of making eye contact, smiling, saying hello, all of those things, believe it or not, matter a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then all the better, we'll do tests on like creating psychological safety and the idea of the tone that you speak
Yep.
with, or all of that kind of matters and plays into it.
Hmm.
But I think the one of the important takeaways for me is just that our small actions, or a friend of mine calls them touch points, Doug Conant, that it matters so much to people, whether those are
Yeah.
strangers, whether that's you're checking out at Trader Joe's, whether that's, a close colleague in the workplace. These, especially now when people, not that, there's been kind of a trend that people are feeling worse and people need,
Mm,
neutral thinking and
yeah.
those
No
tools
question.
more than ever. But the power that we have to, for example, lift people up in our small touch points is immense.
I love what you're saying here because, again, our late co-founder Trevor would always say, and friend Trevor would say, do simple better. And like
Yeah,
you're literally talking about just smiling,
yeah,
being friendly, being kind. I mean, it's, gosh, well, to remind you, we have 5 kids. They're now ages 7 to 17, those 5 kids. And I think they were babies when you and I first met.
yeah,
But what's interesting about, Jess and myself as we raise our kids is like trying to get them to do some of the simple things better and just
yeah,
being kind. It's almost like there's a vacuum right now and a lack of kindness in some cases. And how do you just show up and just be kind to others? And so for you to mention some of those things before you get into all the data is like, I think it's pretty powerful. Because
yeah,
I think people thought you probably with all your credentials would start with all these statistics and these double blind randomized placebo controlled studies, and you said, just smile. I can do that, right? I mean, that's pretty amazing, and
yeah.
it's great. It's
Well,
really refreshing to hear.
yeah, I mean, so since you mentioned that specifically, the 10-5 way is something that I'll often mention in talks, which was actually just this program that a hospital, Ochsner Healthcare System in Louisiana started
Okay.
to try to increase civility, but it was between employees and employees. And the idea was if you're within 10 feet, you make eye contact and smile. 5 feet, you say hello, and what they found is that
Wow.
civility spread, patient satisfaction scores rose, as did patient referrals. And
Wow.
I just think it shows kind of the power of the contagion and our small actions. And,
Yeah.
even if it's you and I treating each other this way in a coffee shop or something,
Yeah.
people catch it. And literally, it affects them and their mood, their subsequent behavior. And so I just, I love that study and that
Yeah.
finding because I think it really demonstrates that we have more power than we might think.
Yeah, no question. Yeah, and that's I like how intentional that hospital system was in doing that. Those are two specific things, here's how many feet you got to be away, here's what you're going to do. What a powerful study.
Yeah.
Can you say the name of that study again, or that hospital system that did that?
Yeah, so Ochsner Healthcare in
Okay.
Louisiana.
Okay. That's great.
So
That's
and
awesome.
yeah.
Yeah. We'll put that in a post. I think that's fantastic information to share. How does civility connect with human flourishing and thriving teams?
Yeah, so what we find is that when people are civil to each other on teams, that their sense of thriving, so energy, like thriving, when we talk about thriving, it's really a
Hmm.
sense of energy, a sense of you feel like you're moving forward, you feel like you're growing and or learning. And so when people feel respect among teammates, what we find is that there's a much higher level of thriving.
Yeah.
And part of why that matters is just that thriving is tied to things like performance and creativity and retention and whole engagement, satisfaction, commitment, so a whole host of beneficial outcomes, not to mention health and well-being, which of course is huge
Hmm.
these days too.
And also, there's you mentioned rudeness too in the past around like and how that impairs creativity and performance. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so what we find in a variety of different studies, experiments, and field data, in organizations, is that when people even just witness rudeness, much less experience it,
Hmm.
their creativity drops. So we find that, for example, it hijacks their attention and their focus, and as a result, their memory actually tends to work 18% slower.
Oh wow.
And yeah, so it has real effects on people's brains. We're actually doing more studies with MRIs and finding like, brain scans basically to
Mhm.
show some of these effects in as powerful and as different ways to really try to increase the motivation for like, why should we care about this? What should we do differently? How
Yep.
does this matter?
Yeah, I mean, it is that is really powerful data. Because you think
Mhm.
about like if somebody's rude, it's just like whatever. You just you don't think it has that much of an effect on your performance. But again, we listen to a lot of the speakers that we have here, and they talk a lot about like even just like when you talk about negativity and things that you're taking in, say for instance in the news, it's like if
Mhm.
you start out watching the news and seeing all that negativity, people being rude, arguing with each other, whatever it is, it really does set you up for failure throughout the rest of the day, and how you're perceiving everything else that's coming at you. So yeah, I think that, I mean, that rudeness stat is really powerful.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this work has been done in healthcare where I think the consequences are, so incredibly high when it comes to patient safety and things
Mm-hmm.
like that. So, a friend of mine, Amir Erez, and his team found that, for example, when medical teams were exposed to rudeness, they just
Okay.
heard it,
Yep.
they performed worse not only in all of their diagnostics, but in all the procedures they did. And so that was really scary.
Right.
And then we're, kind of continuing that work and finding just how it affects performance, but also ties to things like patient safety and patients' health and well-being.
Mm-hmm. How about environment? So whether it's in how we're working today.
Mhm.
Are you out? How much time are you spending out in California versus North Carolina now?
Yeah,
Tell me a
back
little
and
bit about that.
forth.
Are you
So
okay?
I just finished up some teaching. I'll be heading back to UNC shortly, but
Okay.
yeah, I try to. I was just with my brother's family out here, so that
That's
was
awesome.
nice.
Are you still
Yeah.
living? You still have a place though in Southern California? You still have in
Mhm.
LA? Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, and so what, like now that even since the last time we worked together, things have changed a lot with the way people are working. A lot more folks working remotely. What is how does civility in that environment, the current work environment, play into how we perform?
Yeah, I think it makes a huge difference. I mean, one of the things that is apparent is that there's a lot of I don't want to say rift, but
Hmm.
there's, kind of a divisiveness in society, much less in workplaces, where I think what civility does is despite your differences, whatever those may be, that you're able to have at least a foundation of treating
Mm,
each other with just, human respect. And you don't have to agree with someone. You don't have to, you can have strong opinions. You can even give criticism,
yeah.
but it's the how part of
Yeah.
it that I think really embodies civility. So
Mhm.
that's what matters. So it's not as if, I'm trying to coach people to not have these difficult conversations
Yeah.
or even to do performance reviews, where you really need to provide radical candor. I actually think that
Right.
Kim Scott's idea about radical candor, where you care personally but you challenge directly,
Mm,
is really a sweet spot. And she also has called it. She told me compassionate candor, and I
okay.
like that a lot.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Anson Dorrance and I were working on with the team was this idea of you're loving critics. And so you're holding each other accountable for certain things and providing feedback, whether that was with their core values or other things. But doing it, but the how matters. And
Yeah.
so focusing on that. And as long as I mean, that's where the power of things like the 10-5 way come in, because when people feel like their leaders care about them. And that comes down to some really, again, the Doug Conan's touch points, like,
Mhm.
are you checking in? Do you ask how you are? Do you say hello to me? Do
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
you know, do I matter? If I do, then I can handle a lot more from you.
Mm,
And, we create a situation where there's going to be a lot more of the give and take of radical candor, such that we're basically coaching each other then. So we're
that's
lifting
right.
each other up. And so that's what I think is, civility provides the opportunity for a lot deeper collaboration, a
Mhm.
lot richer relationships,
Yep.
this idea of psychological safety, which is so core to, those outcomes like performance and learning. And um, turnover and things like that. So I think civility is just kind of, if you have that, you're able to do and get so much more from people.
Hmm.
Without that, I think you're going to suffer so many costs.
Yeah. And I think you were so ahead of the curve too with on this, because I think, being in the business world for 18 years before we started Limitless Minds, if you would have said civility to me, it almost sounds like soft,
Right.
like
Yep.
not, like, no, we need accountability. We need, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Right. And it's interesting because when COVID hit, I remember sitting down with a leader at a major pharmaceutical company. So this guy's an executive, and he goes, DJ, he goes, I'm struggling right now because my people, they can't really get out in the field and see their customers, and yet we still need to drive results, or they're just now starting to go out a little bit here and there, and I'm trying to balance empathy with a drive for performance.
Yep.
And I was like, oh. And then as I started to talk to other leaders at other companies, they were all struggling with the same thing. They're trying to
Hmm.
figure out how to, really get their teams to, buy in to the vision and the mission in a changing, ever changing environment. And they found just exactly what you've taught and what you write about and what you and everything that you preach around. You really got to pour in and get to know your people and your team. And when you
Yeah.
do that, they're willing to run through a wall for you. And so how do you unpack that and just become better at it? And so it's like, I mean, like the work that you're doing is so great.
Oh,
And
thanks.
it's so awesome to see like how you continue to be able to impact people at, at different universities now and different organizations. And it's really cool to see.
Well,
Um,
thank you.
no problem. I got a question for you around, you mentioned some of the things that I think can cause some conflict at work, out just even in our own communities and in our own families for that matter, our teams and our families. um how do we find truth? Like,
Mhm.
I think I mean, like, you got all these different places where we get different hits of information in the media, social media, all the different things. But like, how are you finding truth in this ever changing and evolving environment?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, in the context that I work in, and then work with leaders, it goes back to that idea of radical candor. So the
Okay.
idea of from people creating a relationship and then asking for the truth, basically. So
Okay.
we're each other's loving critics. I think the idea of if you can create a culture where people are honest with each other, like whether you call it compassionate candor or radical candor, I
Hmm.
think that's really key. But people have to feel comfortable with you. And I think that's where the civility part comes in.
Yeah.
Like they know you care.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just, trying to rely on people that I trust. And I think like what you described as far as what leaders were trying to do, even with COVID early on,
Yeah.
I think it's that idea of creating trust. Like,
Okay.
Ansa and Dorrance would talk about, like, I can't coach them unless they trust me.
Mm.
And so, really early on, building that foundation of I care, I'm trustworthy, things like that. And
Yeah.
then, hopefully, what you're doing is it's not just the one on ones, but as you brought up, like the team, like that's part of our, so core values come in really handy then. But yeah, the idea of loving critics, I try to hold on to and,
Hmm.
talk about with leaders.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you brought up the word trust. And I think truth and trust go hand in hand, and it's and so as you were kind of talking through that, I'm like, that's a the thriving teams that I've led in the past, it's like, if there's a high level of trust, I
Mhm.
think everybody shows up a little bit better to work, and shows up the best version of themselves. So it's a really, really, really great nugget.
Yeah.
Your latest book, Mastering Community, right, speaks to some of the deeper ideas around need and belonging. How does civility help us build community at work in this mastering community?
Yeah, I mean, similar ideas that we talked about, really. I mean, I
Hmm.
think one of the early chapters talks about uniting people. And
Okay.
so I use Phil Jackson actually as an example. And
Okay.
Steve Kerr had talked about how, he really cared about the idea of almost creating a tribe,
Yep.
and it started in the film room, even though they wouldn't be seeing film, or it would be actually just connecting with each other before they would ever hit the court,
Yeah.
each day. And so a lot of it comes down to, like, are you able to kind of bring people together?
Hmm.
And then, I think respect is as a foundation. I talk about radical candor being
Yeah.
so important.
Yep.
Um, Caring about, again, the caring concept is maybe like the theme in the
Yeah. Yeah.
sense of the well-being of people, like you mentioned, the empathy that the leader talked about with COVID. One of the pieces that it kind of hits on trust and truth that you mentioned is
Hmm.
self-awareness. So, like, the
Mm.
bridge to that is that you really want people to be aware of what are they contributing for better or worse. Like, are they infecting people the way that, Trevor and I had talked about, as far as, you might not mean to do this, but you might be having a really
Yeah.
negative effect on people.
Yeah.
And so, trying to get to the truth, as you were talking about that, I was also thinking, gosh, like, the importance of self-awareness is huge. And
Yep.
how do you walk people to that, such that,
Mm.
they care about what they're bringing to the team, and understand and can make adjustments
Yeah.
accordingly to
Yeah.
better their own performance, but the teams and or the organizations.
Yeah. That's no, that's a really good point. And I'm also thinking about if I'm a listener right now, I'm saying, hey, my team, like, our culture sucks. Okay. Like, and I like, what do I do? Like, where do I even start if I'm on a team right now where my culture sucks?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important that you bring people together. I mean,
Hmm.
certainly you could be having one-on-one conversations to find
Hmm.
out more about what's really their experience, what's at the root of that, because really what you're trying to do is almost get a sense of, like, what are the patterns, where do I focus on, where am I going to really get the best return, what are some examples I can provide, that on the positive end and on the negative end, as far as what we want to work on, and perhaps some role models to bring in. But I think then you have to bring the group together and
Okay.
have the hard conversation, whether that's an offsite, whether that's what have you. Um, that can be done with a little training. But one of the powerful things that I've done with leaders or organizations is actually, like, come up with core values. So the people are driving kind of
Yep.
what kind of behaviors are important to them,
Hmm.
given, let's say you have a few values, like, what's important, and how we're demonstrating respect, and
Okay.
then deciding on those values. Like, they've done this with post-its once they
Yeah. Yeah.
brainstorm, like, what values are you,
Yeah.
do you want, and are you willing to hold people accountable for?
Mm.
And then a leader will break that down, like, these are our top 10, and
Yeah.
it's been really powerful in shifting the culture. But I think without some specifics, or without some norms or values guiding a group, I think it can break down. And
Yeah.
so that can be really helpful. And in the best cases, I've seen, like, that particular leader of a law firm actually had them engraved in granite, put in their lobby.
Okay.
They won best
Okay.
place to work. But there's been a small government agency that just did this wonderful job. They were posted everywhere, but they had, like, the 10 principles of civility on the back of their name badge. They knew them by heart. So when
Yeah.
I was in their training once, it was so cool because, this gentleman just said, oh, yeah, we just call each other out. We say, seven, dude, seven, or
7.
five,
Okay.
man, five. And I love that,
Yeah.
because that's what you want. Like, you want
Yeah.
people holding each other accountable and kind of catching you in the moment, so that you can ideally self correct, but
Yep.
also, yeah. So I think that there are some really fantastic ways that you can reinforce those values or norms or whatever term you use for them. But
Yeah.
that can be helpful because it can ground people in specifics.
Yep. No, that's helpful. And so that's as a leader or organization. If I'm an employee though, and our culture stinks on our team. Is there a way that I can impact those leaders in that organization? Should I run and go find another team? Like, tell me a little bit what your thoughts are around that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you should certainly have influence. I mean, one of the things is to share like what are the outcomes?
Okay.
Like how does this matter? Because I think you do want to speak their language. Like
Yeah.
whatever outcome they care most about, you want to frame it as far as like this is hurting us in these ways. But you also can affect things just by the way that you behave. So like
Mm,
you are a role model to others. Like if let's think about mid-level managers or leaders, or even teammates. Like
yeah.
we know from whether it's sports teams or work teams, they have teammates have a powerful effect on you.
No
And
question. No question.
so, so I think that if nothing else, know that your small actions do matter.
Yeah.
And what we know is that like incivility is like a virus, and you can catch it anywhere, and it spreads, unfortunately.
Hmm.
But civility spreads too, and so I think like you can be the change that
I
you're
like
looking
that.
for,
I
and
really
and
like. I
that's what
really
I
like
would
that.
really recommend. Like you know, again, your small actions matter a lot.
Yeah, I really like that. I mean, it's like we used to call it leading up, and
Mm,
just really modeling the example that you want to see your management or your team have. And I think as a I don't know who taught me that. It's somebody, it must have one of my mentors early on said you always have an opportunity to lead. People are
yeah.
always watching, and they will model your behavior over time. And so be consistent with it. And so I think that I like what you're saying there because I think it's very practical, and I think a lot of times people they run from those
Mhm.
situations, and I think there's a time to leave if the situation is toxic. There's probably you probably would agree with me on that on if there's situations where you leave, but I think oftentimes we may run too early and
Yeah.
and maybe leave great opportunities on the table because sometimes those leaders, those really rude negative leaders will find a way to seek excellence elsewhere, as
Yeah.
one of my old bosses would say, and that's okay too. They're if they may start to feel out of place if they're the one that's rude and everybody else is
Mhm.
operating in a way that's encouraging or helping folks develop. Um,
Yeah.
is there a way that like a certain technique or whatever besides just kind of modeling that you would give if somebody does have like a rude boss? Is there anything like specific that you'd have them do?
Yeah, so if they have a rude boss and I mean, I think the important thing is this idea of like providing the compassionate candor or that kind of thing. Because
Okay.
so much of what I've learned is that there's a great percentage of these negative behaviors that stem from a lack of self awareness. So, like my friend Tasha Urich does really great research on self awareness, and she's found that 95% of people believe they're self aware, and
Mm,
yet her data says only 10 to 15% are. And
yeah.
so 80% of people are missing the mark on any given day. And so I think and sadly, another friend had shared with me, like a top executive, HR executive, years ago, she shared that as people move up in the organization, she felt bad for them. And at first, I didn't understand, I didn't
Right.
connect. And then she shared because they get less and less realistic feedback
Mm,
from others. And
okay.
so I think, like, if you think about feedback as a gift, it's hard when people have more power or status. But if you can find a way to have the conversation, whether it's framed as you're looking for feedback and you have coffee or go out to lunch and you get some feedback, and then you have an opportunity to say, would you like some feedback as well? And you have to feel safe and comfortable and not like you're risking your career, but um, leaders can value that tremendously because they
Mm-hmm.
don't get as much of that. And so depends on the relationship. It might not always be best coming from you, but I
Yep.
think overall, so much of this, I would say the majority comes from a lack of self-awareness. And
Got it.
so you want to get people the information so that
Mm-hmm.
they can improve their game.
No, that's great. All right, I'm going to ask you one of the hardest questions I think anybody's ever asked you. So here we go. So you're from Cleveland, like we mentioned early on.
Yes.
You're currently a professor at UNC, right?
Mhm.
So Michael Jordan or LeBron James?
Oh, yeah, yeah. No, you can't give an answer on record. Yeah. No, no, we have this debate.
That's a bad situation you're in, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm blessed with the players and the coaches that UNC have had. There's no shortage of great role models to learn from. But
No
yeah, I
question.
loved MJ, and I love what LeBron's done.
Uh-huh.
Not only for the city of Cleveland, I so appreciate that, but w- all that he stands for and does off the court, which I think is wonderful. Like the schools he started,
Yeah, no
and
question.
in the community, and honestly the role model that he is. I mean,
Mhm.
he, even like seeing him in the Olympics and seeing what he said about that and how he
Yeah.
carried himself, and uh yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I think he's a wonderful representative from Cleveland. I don't know how you feel
Yeah.
about it, but
Well, listen, so it's funny because I feel like all the goats are following you around, right? You got the LA connection, you got the Cleveland. So I mean, maybe it's Dr. Porath that's creating all this greatness. I agree with you. I mean, I was when I moved to Cleveland in 2001, the one of the first names I heard was LeBron James. And at that time, I
uh,
think he was 15 or 16 years old. He's
yeah,
going to St. Vincent St. Mary's, and he's now, on the cover of Sports Illustrated in a high school jersey. And I'm just like, there is no way this kid is going to ever be able to do all the things that they're saying in these articles. And then I
yeah,
saw him play, actually where the Cavs play. I think they called it Gund Arena at that time.
hmm,
And he was still in high school, and I'm like, oh, he's pretty good. Like he's really talented, right? Um, I would have never guessed, though, even watching him play in high school, that he would ever been able to, just not because he wasn't good. It was just because the
right,
expectations were so high. And so
yeah,
to be able to see him reach and exceed expectations, and also, as a kid watching Michael Jordan and the greatness there, I love the debate. I mean, I think
yeah,
I think there's arguments on both sides, not to
right,
play kind of neutral here, but like I do see the arguments, the competitiveness of Michael Jordan and that era and the physicality. I mean, it was a different time. And I respect and admire Jordan for, all of his greatness. But it's a great debate. I love when people have it, because I like to
yeah.
hear the different, but I mean, I don't think you can go wrong with either one. It's
No,
just, I mean, they're both goats. It's
yeah.
so great.
It's interesting how you describe them too, because this was all front of mind as I
Hmm.
was rereading Trevor's books recently, and whether it's them, Russell Wilson obviously was a
Yeah,
big example in
that's right.
those books, and obviously it's an important part of Limitless Minds, but
No question.
like those people weren't. I mean, they had to work at it,
Yes.
and so I think like some of the things that Trevor talks about in terms of daily habits
Hmm.
and the mindset part and all of those commitments. I mean, it's pretty interesting when you look at elite athletes that, especially that have done it for that long,
Yeah.
like LeBron has recently,
Yes.
and um, and Jordan, he
Yeah.
had an amazing long career as well. So
Great career.
anyway, it's fun to take a look at the habits that got them there and
Right.
kept them there.
I mean, it's funny because even with Jordan, a lot of like my son who's 12, he has no clue that Jordan wins 3 NBA championships in a row, then
Yep.
decides, like, I think it was partially because of his competitiveness. Like,
Yeah.
this is almost boring and it's not hard enough. I'm gonna go try to do another professional sport in the middle of my
Right.
greatness.
Yeah.
Takes a year and a half off or whatever, comes back and wins 3 more in a row. Like
Yep.
that to me, I mean, so there's 2 years there. There's a 2 year gap. I think he took a year and a half off, but we're talking about maybe 8 championships in a row if he decides not to be overly competitive. But that was also his
Right.
strength, right? So it's
Yeah.
like, how do you think those two are as how would you rank them? Just again, outside looking in, you haven't worked side by side with either one of them,
Mhm.
but how would you say they are as teammates?
Wonderful. It's funny because I came across a really neat example of Michael Jordan
Okay.
when I was researching for the Mastering Civility book. And it was actually a story about Coach K. And he was the Olympic coach, or he was actually the assistant Olympic coach.
Okay.
Um, and Jordan, was all over buildings there and everything else. And so at the time, Coach K was not who he became,
Right.
and MJ actually asked him, at the end of practice, like, Coach, would you please, you know, help me or rebound for, and you know, Coach K just took so much away from the conversation because he said, MJ he could have ordered me around. He could have, it was the Duke UNC rivalry. He
Yeah.
could have
Right. Right.
hated me, and yet he was so respectful. It was like, please. And then after they finished up, MJ said, thank you, and
Yeah.
everything. And
I love
it
that.
was just an example of, like, at that level. So he was winning championships at that point.
Right. Right.
And Coach K was not known at that point,
Yeah.
not known well, I
Right.
should say.
Right.
And MJ just had that level of respect, and the please and thank yous matter. And Coach K held on to
Mm.
that. And what he took away was, like, he could have made me feel so small. I would have done it. I
Yeah.
felt like I needed to do
Yeah.
it,
Right.
and yet he made me feel so valued and respected in those
Wow.
tiny ways.
I've never heard that story. That's amazing. What a great story. And Josh Lifrak, do you know Josh? Josh Lifrak, he's one of our coaches and
Like, not well personally, but yes,
okay.
I know who he
So
is and stuff.
so so he was telling me this about a month ago, and we were talking at an event, and he said, he was saying that in professional sports, he worked with the Chicago Cubs when they won the World
Mm,
Series in 2016. He was one of the mental
yeah.
conditioning coaches there, and he was saying that when he was in professional sports, that when he saw people that would interact and engage with the assistant coaches, the equipment managers, the whatever the lower level positions were at the time, he would look at that and he go, those people get it. Whether it was another was
Yeah.
it whether it was a player, another coach, and how they treated those lower level leaders was really important. He goes, because what happens is you blink and 10 years
Mhm.
later, those equipment managers, those assistant coaches are now head coaches. They're general managers. They've built the equity, they've done the work, they've done all the things, and they remember how you treated them when they were in those lower
Oh,
level positions. And so
yeah.
as you say that, like, I mean, I think that there's greatness to that. Whether
Mhm.
like whether Jordan was doing it intentionally, unintentionally, he realized there's certain things that you have to do to be great. Humility is part of it, treating people, doing simple better, treating people with respect, finding these acts of kindness, because that was a kind act, really.
Yeah.
And he also knew Jordan was smart enough to know that he could learn something from anybody,
Yeah.
and not probably not realizing he was going to be learning something from one of the greatest college coaches ever, right?
Yeah.
When it's all said and done. And so, what a really powerful story that you share there. Really cool.
Oh,
Um,
thanks.
so, any final as we wrap up, any final words of encouragement for leaders who want to build thriving, great teams?
Yeah, I think just the idea of it's worth it, and that
Okay.
your small actions will matter. You make a difference in the lives of people, and you'll benefit from the ripple effects, that
Hmm.
multiply throughout not only that particular team, but the organization. And
Yeah.
people catch that, for better. Again, the virus analogy I think is strong, but people also notice when it's really positive, like, so I think just the
Hmm.
idea of being the difference maker, you can really shift people. And especially now when people are struggling, you
Hmm.
have no idea what a positive effect that you may have on them.
That's cool.
Um,
That's cool. And I mean, I think too, with, with the statistics that you gave, positive versus negative, you may have to do it 5 or 7 times to get the same
Yeah.
impact, right? But that doesn't
Yep.
mean we don't do it. I think that's one of the takeaways that I'm getting here as a leader is, if I want to continue to have high performing, thriving teams, like don't give up on the work, and continue to spread the good news and spread kindness, and do all the things that you want to see reciprocated throughout your organization. So that's I love that. Really, really like that.
Yeah. And just the theme, like one of the things I often frame talks with is who do you want to be? Do you
Okay.
want to lift people up and make them feel valued, appreciated, and heard? Or, might you be holding people down, making them feel
Mm,
small? And if so, you are not going to get the contributions that you're looking for, and they won't grow to their potential. But with civility and with, creating an environment where people could thrive, you're really unlocking their potential.
so cool. So cool. So any books on the way?
Oh,
Any more books that you tell us about that?
yeah.
What are you up to next?
Yeah, so I am working with Anson Dorrance at UNC, on a book related to growth, like how do you help people grow?
Love it.
And I think it's going to be right up your alley because not only does it focus on, how do you help someone as far as performance, but connect with people. So we have kind of a framing around that. But
It's cool.
also, what really gets people to the highest peak, and Adam Grant certainly wrote about this in his latest book, but character. And
Mm,
so, what we find makes a huge difference in championship teams versus not is, whether players are, living the core values basically at a
wow.
high level.
Yeah. I'm excited about it. When would that be released? Roughly?
We don't have a release date yet,
Okay.
so
All
I
right.
got to
All
get
right. Well,
cracking.
look, that means I'll just kind of have to ping you regularly to see what's
Yeah,
good.
that
That's
would be
so
good. That would be
that's
good.
so great. What's the best place to follow you on social? Are you on social media at all? So
Yeah, I'm more active on LinkedIn, although I need to
good.
do more of that even. I'm on X, but I haven't been posting a lot. So
Okay.
yeah, I have a website, just christineporath.com, and I try to have links to articles or books or talks, that are up there. But
That's awesome.
yeah,
Well, keep up the great work, and we
thanks.
again we appreciate all the work that you do. And you are an absolute trendsetter in this area. The
Oh,
world needs more Christine Poraths, for sure. And we will continue to like and comment on your work on
thanks.
social media and everywhere you're at. So, and for the Limitless Minds listeners, remember you can follow us on LinkedIn, IG, Twitter. We're out there. Like, follow us, share, and remember that you don't have to be sick to get better.